Hello, Search here from the Backyard Driving Range. Well, today we have actually going to discuss one of the major swing principles behind the peak performance golf swing that I think is absolutely utterly critical for hitting good golf shots. Solid, straight, and controlling your swing and controlling therefore your impact and ball flight and where your ball goes. Okay, I received 2 emails from a gentleman named Walt. First one came on August 13th, and Walt says this: just saw the last of Don's daily tips. He once again insists on claiming he has no wrist action. This time he tells us to look at baseball players swinging a bat. He even uses Hank Aaron as an example. Please, someone show Don video of his and his son's wrist position at the top of the swing. I can't take it anymore. One last comment. Don's baseball players start out with their wrist cocked flexed, set to use the term that best suits you, before they start moving the bat down on the forward swing. Other than this one nonsensical belief of yours, keep up the good work. Okay, I don't think it's nonsensical, and I think I'm going to finally put this thought and this topic to rest, or to bed, so to speak, and I'm going to show a couple things. Walt came back with another email on, and I think the big thing we have to discuss here is Walt's term about when he talks about our wrist position at the top and no wrist action. Okay, we got to talk about what the wrist action is. All right, and I'm going to cover that as one of the first things I speak about. So going to Walt's second email, he says that one came in on 8/17, 4 days later, and he says Don does nothing more than rotate his arms from the setup position to where his hands are at waist level, and thus maintains the left forearm to shaft angle, approximately 15 degrees. As his hands move from his waist to his right shoulder height, his wrists move to form an angle of approximately 90 degrees between the left forearm and the shaft. What does he call that movement of his wrist? Submitted by Walt. Okay, so Walt brings up 2 points, and we're going to examine those today. Before I go into that, I'm going to read I guess we can call it a testimonial that came in. All right? And this testimonial goes along to the point that I always make about what I try to do in terms of my wrist, which I'll state after I finish this. Since starting the Search swing, and this message comes to us from E. Lindsay. And Mr. Lindsay states, since starting the Search swing, I've never had such a dramatic impact as I did yesterday. In the back of my mind, I always felt I had to cock my wrists in order to get maximum swing speed. I'll repeat that. I always felt I had to cock my wrist in order to get maximum swing speed, even though your instruction is clear. Yesterday, I concentrated on 2 things from one of last week's daily emails: keeping the left leg in place and a firm left wrist, all 3 words capitalized. The results were dramatic. I added 20 yards to my drive with a lower trajectory from the high balls I had been hitting, and with a nice soft draw. My irons had been a source of frustration, and I gained confidence as well. Remember, I'm 82 and have gone from an 18 to 13 using the swing. I shot 37 on the back 9 yesterday. That's from Ed Lizzie. Okay? Last but not least, Walt, I sent both of your emails to my main physiological mentor, Dr. Ned Armstrong, and I asked him to read them and make a comment that I could present to you and the whole Surge Nation as regards this concept of what happens with the wrists from the setup through the top of the backswing and impact. Okay? Yes, I wrote, Dr. Ned, I just asked him to look at these swings, and he came back. Yes. Without wrist cock, forearm rotation through the elbow linked with the shoulder motion is necessary to keep the club shaft on plane and provides a source of power through impact. To add wrist cock would lay the club shaft off plane at the top of the backswing and lead to an off-plane downswing. This will make it difficult to square the club in an inefficient release. To add wrist cock would lay the club shaft off plane at the top of the backswing and lead to an off-plane downswing. This will make it difficult to square the club and an inefficient release. Okay, now that comes from the expert in physiology who I've studied with. And part of the things that happened way back in the beginning is we started talking about wrist cock, Dr. Ned and I. So you've heard the testimonial from E. Lindsay, and I believe that's Ed Lindsay. And you read Dr. Armstrong's concept. So let me redefine what I say about no wrist cock. Good wrist action is no wrist action. Once I set my club at address and I firm up my fingers and wrists, I basically firm them up, squeezing upward, and and I firm it up to where the fingers, the back of the hand itself, the wrist and the forearms are locked. Just as if I was going to stand here and punch something backwards. All right? In fact, many times if we're going to punch something backwards, we'll actually arch the wrist out. But we're going to basically keep it dead straight. All right? If you're going to just hammer something like that. All right? Now, I try to maintain that feeling. The firmness or the muscle activateds will only go up to just below the elbow. If you reach the elbow, you will effectively lock and very likely hyperextend it, which will start causing a lot of wrist problems, and also ends up tightening up the upper forearm as it goes into the shoulder socket and attaches to with all the muscles that make the arm work will start to tighten up also, which will make swinging the club a lot more difficult. So once I set that position in my hands, my goal is to, when I make my final set of everything, and I do this with especially in the left hand, I firm up the right hand and the wrists and forearms also. But there will be a change in wrist angle. Now watch what happens. From here I set it, and once I take it back I rotate. Walt discussed that. But here's the key. Look at my hands right here. There's the finger, there's a position right there. I'm not going to, you can measure that angle all you want between my hands. I'm going to start here. The club is below the hands. How do I get the club above the hands? All I do is I go in the catcher's mitt, and from there I just lift my arms up to where they come straight up. That creates just about a right angle. I'm taking it from below my hands. Now why does it have a little bit more angle? It's because of the lift at the shoulder. Because right now I'm lifting it straight up. At this angle it is not. At address it is not directly straight above my hands. It is at an angle which is reducing the angle here, but even without changing this angle here, when I come up to the top, it has more angle up there just because I've lifted from the shoulder, not the wrist. If there's anything that adds to that angle right here, getting to 90 degrees, it's the fact that the wrist doesn't change, but the elbow may have a little flexation. Getting back to Hank Aaron and most home run hitters, I looked at Kai Yastrzemski, who had a straight up bat. You look at many of those guys at bat, their wrists are relatively straight. The forearm to the club is at a 90-degree angle, or wherever they have it. Today, most guys lay the bat off, and that's why I think they could become a lot better hitters if they got it high like Kyle, because it'll just drop in the slot. If it's already laid off, it's heavier and harder to swing around. But getting off that subject, since I'm just bringing it up because that was mentioned in one of the emails from Walt, at this point, many of them, the wrists are firm, the elbow is already flexed. It's the elbow, the flexation of the elbow. When they go in and hit, their elbow straightens out at the point where they're hitting the ball. All right, just the same as I do. So my wrist isn't changing. And just to show that, I've decided to go to an extra big demonstration today. All right, duct tape. I'm going to take duct tape, and I am going to take a nice big strip off of here. I'm going to take these scissors, okay, and I'm going to strap them to the outside of my hand. I'm going to put them through my watch here. I'm going to somewhat hopefully lock them in when I get the bottom way down, okay, and I'm going to then tape it in place right here around my wrist, okay. So relatively flat right here. I'm going to take it back in the catcher's mitt, and I'm just going to lift it straight up. Take it back in the catcher's mitt. Relatively flat. You can see the watch is still in my watch band. All right? Straight back and straight up. If there's any flexation, especially in the transition, there's a little coming in, there's more coming in my elbow than my wrist, so to speak. Once the club's going up and I pull it down, the weight of the club transitioning, the weight of the head against the shaft of my hands will cause a little flexation. It might cause a slight change in the angle of my left wrist, but I'm doing everything to fight it. If I truly cocked it, that wrist would be like this at the top. That's a cocked wrist. This is I can flexate my wrist, and it might have a little change in the angle, but it's not cocking. All right, I haven't used my right here because I can't do it because of the setup I got on my wrist right here. Up and down. Now, the reason why I can't swing through is because if the left wrist is flat, relatively flat, and I'm fighting everything I can do mentally and physically to maintain this angle and not let it break in the backswing to the top of the backswing and then down to impact. if the left wrist is flat all the way, when I get up to the top here, which wrist is cupped? The right wrist is cupped. The back wrist is cupped. The backhand wrist is cupped. Now, if there for every action is an equal and opposite reaction, after both wrists straighten out at impact and they now start to go into the forward upswing, guess what has to happen? I can't do it right now. The left wrist will start to cup as the right wrist becomes straight and becomes the string from impact all the way to the finish. So for every action is a equal and opposite reaction. The back, the top, the upper wrist, the left hand for a right-handed golfer, is flat all the way up into impact. And as we go through and I start to go up, the right wrist, which came in and straightened out, they're both straight at impact. That's a big point today because many golfers are taught to keep that right wrist as cocked as long as they can through impact. That's sort of like pushing the club through rather than letting it truly release. But again, getting back to this subject, the right wrist straightens out, which means the left wrist has to cup. So there is a cupping, but it's after impact up to the finish. But I think hopefully this can demonstrate that I'm doing everything I can. If there's a slight change, it's very subtle. But the key is I'd have to be, if I had this club, I could grip this club at 90 degrees, it could come all the way up to 90 degrees easily. But the key is this angle right here, one last time, right here. Once I come from here, that's it, and it goes up. It gets to 90 degrees appearance from the camera view because of the fact that I didn't change the wrist, and because of the fact I've taken the club from a diagonal angle at address position, which is about 60 degrees, and I've done what? I've lifted it from my shoulder up to 90 degrees up here without changing one simple thing. I hope this truly explains everything, and this is the last time we have to address this subject because it's there. The idea of the angle changes is especially in this position where people say we cock our wrists, is because the hands move faster than the eye, just like magicians, and so therefore and especially with DJ being 6.5 inches taller than me, that when he comes up and stands it up so fast, the hands, when he rotates and lifts, and he gets up, and we know DJ swings a little longer than me, so I'm gonna clear that up right now. We know that especially with the driver, he tends to get the parallel in 3-woods, but if you look at his middle irons to short irons to the wedges, he's definitely pretty damn close to three quarters vertical. All right. Now again, that's all acceptable about there. As long as the club falls down, you have an acceptable club. It's when it falls straight down, then you're getting too long. As long as it slides down a little, that's a decent range, but the best range is one where it's going to slide relatively straight down, which you can get to about right there and it'll still slide almost all the way down the shaft. That's a vertical club. And again, I don't think there's any question that I take this diagonal angle and in lifting from my shoulder sockets with both arms, I lift it to straight up or just slightly past straight up with longer clubs, because the longer and heavier the club, the more momentum it's built. And then when I transition, there's a little bit more flexation in my arm, but I am doing everything I physically and mentally can do to never let that lift wrist change in the swing from takeaway to impact. After that, it changes, as I said, because the back arm, the lower arm, the right hand for me, a right-handed golfer, gets straight and becomes a string, and the left one has to break, which I can't do it right now. So hopefully, folks, this clears this up, and especially with Walt, I hope you can understand this, and because I can't find any other way to say it, and I don't think I can find anything more poignant than Dr. Ned saying forearm rotation through the elbow. That's where the slight flexation is. Linked with the shoulder motion is necessary to keep the club shaft on plane and provides a source of power through impact. To add wrist cock would lay the club shaft off plane at the top of the backswing and lead to an off plane downswing. This will make it difficult to square the club and cause an inefficient release. Okay, so hopefully this clears this up, Walt, and because again, I think you're very cute at seeing things, but I don't know. It just came to me about before I started this about that angle versus this angle. With you see more angle up there than here is because the shaft is not vertical to the ground here, but it is vertical to the ground up there, and therefore 90 degrees. But all of it happened from lifting from the shoulders with a little flexation in the arms. But I'm doing everything I can to maintain my left wrist angle, mentally, physically, whatever term you want to use, to never let that angle change from takeaway to impact. Okay, that's it for the search today. Hopefully clearing up this concept of good wrist action is no wrist action, meaning your left wrist or your top wrist from takeaway to impact. We get that, and you will start hitting the ball longer and straighter, as Ed Lindsay also said in his testimonial email to us today, and I'm sure many of you out there are going to say the same thing. All right, well that's it for the search. trying to maintain a firm and relatively straight left wrist throughout the backswing to impact. That's it for today, and I'll be talking to y'all again soon.